It is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer on this Christmas night, Jonas. And the Christmas spirit is not in short supply on this very lovely night. It won't be a silent night after we're done with it. After the Ravens dominate the 49ers 33-19 in San Francisco. And Jonas, you were there to see it all. How was it? What kind of spectacle was it for you?
It was something to behold. As we will delve into the disrespect theme that emerged as a pretty strong theme from all the post game commentary. I count myself among the doubters, among the haters. I did not expect, and who frankly could have expected, Ravens 33, 49ers 19. I don't think it was realistic to expect the Ravens to hold this juggernaut of an offense under 20 points. And it felt like it would have been, you would have needed a really devastatingly efficient night on offense to get above 30, 31 points. But the Ravens did it. John Harbaugh talking post game about how this was probably the most complete game of the season in terms of all three phases. Special teams were great. Offense was great. Defense was freaking electric. So I'm still, frankly, a little bit shocked by what we saw. I thought we would see something more akin to what we saw in 2019 when it was another game of the year. That one was a little bit earlier in the season, but just with the way that these two teams were heading, the 49ers on a clear trajectory up, the Ravens, doing enough to get by. It was just hard to imagine again that we would get a result like this, but scoreboard don't lie, man.
You just hinted at it, but what is your word of the day? And perhaps we have contributed to this word of the day.
Shout out Rodney Dangerfield, because the word of the day is disrespect. Disrespectful, whatever iteration of the word that you want to talk about it. From what we were able to gather post game from talking to some guys in the locker room, the Mike Flores, aka Mike Florio, prediction of how this game would go was brought up in a team meeting Saturday. It definitely lit some fuses. I don't think that was the only kindling that just started this, big funeral pyre for the 49ers. I think there was a lot of talk, a lot of predictions. Justin Matabike mentioned podcasts. Maybe he's a listener to the Banner Ravens podcast. Didn't get a chance to ask him that. But every single guy that you talked to in that locker room, even someone as even-keeled as Tyler Linderbaum, was quick to acknowledge that, yes, there were some things that were said that were disrespectful to the Ravens. And as if this Ravens team needed to play with any more of an edge that they already had, they got it. And I think, you saw everything that you needed to know with Lamar Jackson, who, again, is Mr. Cool, Mr. Calm under pressure, going post-game, running down the hallway to the tunnel there, to the locker room, and shouting out Mike Flores, aka Mike Florio. It's just very, very interesting what kind of gets under these Ravens' skin. And for this game, for this Christmas Eve team meeting, it was definitely the predictions of doom and gloom that you and I were party to.
Yeah, not just Lamar Jackson, but the way that the defense played in this game in particular was as if there was a fire underneath them. And we're going to get to the defensive performance in this game. We're going to touch on the special teams, which were good. We'll take a look at the playoff picture as well and how this win affects where the Ravens stand in terms of that number one seed in the AFC. But Jonas, it starts with Lamar Jackson, because the Ravens single-handedly may have flipped the Super Bowl odds, and they may have flipped the MVP odds, because Brock Purdy came into this game as the MVP favorite. He had the better stats. He had more touchdowns. He had much better passing stats than Lamar Jackson. And the Ravens defense forced 4 interceptions, while Lamar Jackson, after starting out this game 1 for 5 with a bizarre intentional grounding in the end zone for a safety after he tripped over the ref, Alex Moore. So that was a bizarre play in and of itself. He finishes the game 23 of 35 for 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, no fumbles. He led the Ravens on 7 consecutive scoring drives. He was doing it with his legs. He was incredibly hard to catch in the pocket. He was targeting numerous different receivers. He looked like the MVP in this game, and I know we've said all season long, he has not perhaps had that 1 or 2 outstanding, light the world on fire, headline grabbing game this season. This was it to me. This was his best game of the season. And after the way that this thing started, I did not see this kind of performance coming after the first 2 drives of this game.
Neither did I. Neither did I. And scope matters, stage matters. And as I wrote about on Saturday for the banner, this is a game that, depending on how many people tuned in, in that second half, whether the audience numbers peaked at a certain point, this might be a game that gets 28, 29, 30, 31 million. That would be the most viewed Ravens regular season game in franchise history, according to the folks at the NFL. So if you are giving that wide of an audience on Christmas night, probably not a whole lot of people watching the NBA. You have the NFL's 2 best teams, or at least the AFC's leading contender and the NFC's leading contender. And it is Lamar Jackson putting this team on his back after, as you said, a kind of sketchy start and just outshining Brock Purdy in every single way. I don't know how you can go on First Take tomorrow or, whatever, is your morning show,
Or
of
this
choice.
podcast.
Yeah, and say that anyone but Lamar is the MVP. Christian McCaffrey might have had a case if 49ers had won this game, but they didn't. Brock Purdy probably threw himself off, the top 2, if not the top 3 with this. You just look at some of the advanced stats, minus 0.44 EPA per play. That is truly horrific. The 4 interceptions, Sam Darnold obviously had the 5th, but Lamar Jackson was built for this moment and Brock Purdy was not. It was not a totally pristine performance from Lamar. He missed some guys. There were, some questionable pocket navigations, but he just does enough to give this offense chances to succeed. And when he's in trouble, he usually gets them out of trouble. The same could be not be said for Brock Purdy. Christian McCaffrey couldn't take it all on himself. He kind of disappeared in that second half. So I don't know what you're going to do if you're an MVP voter and the Ravens close out this AFC with a win against a very, very good Miami Dolphins team next Sunday. And they have this thing wrapped up going to week 18. The MVP battle is a narrative race, and Lamar has by far the strongest narrative going.
And the MVP often comes down to the best player or the quarterback on the best team in the NFL. And the Ravens picking up their 12th win this season, which is the most of any team right now in the NFL, certainly goes a long way. Jonas, you talked about on our pre-game podcast the fact that Brock Purdy was as if he was filling in Wordle letters with the vowels already filled in. Is it more impressive that Lamar Jackson could be doing this, could be putting up this kind of season as he reached his career high for a single season in terms of passing yards and doing it all on the ground, leading all quarterbacks in rushing yards? Is it more impressive that he's not only doing it without the kind of complement of weapons that Brock Purdy has in terms of Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey, but he might not have a receiver reach 1,000 yards this season? Zay Flowers has 680 coming into this game, had 72 in this game. There probably won't be a single player on this Ravens team with 1,000-yard season. And I know his passing stats will not compare by the end of the season to Brock Purdy and maybe some others in terms of yardage and total touchdowns, but he's doing it with a lesser complement of weapons than some of the other players in this MVP race.
Not even that. You just compare what the 49ers have in terms of potential all pros to what the Ravens have in terms of potential Pro Bowlers. San Fran might have 5 all-pro guys on that offense, excluding Brock Purdy. The Ravens, if you kind of prognosticate into what the Pro Bowl rosters could look like. Tyler Linderbaum, I think, is probably a safe bet at center. Although the Creed Humphrey contingent might do enough, and there might be some other competition that is kind of knocks him out of the crowd. Kevin Zeitler, obviously, he got dinged up tonight. Sounds like he'll be good for the long haul. Leading all guards in Pro Bowl voting, but again, he had similar results last year. The coaches and the players didn't see enough in him to get him a Pro Bowl spot. Patrick Ricard, probably a good bet, but again, it's tough to say. Alec Ingold, having a great season in Miami. Don't really know how that voting will go down. So for him to be doing this without Keaton Mitchell, probably his most explosive running back, without J.K. Dobbins, probably his best running back, without Mark Andrews, probably his best overall receiver, with a dinged up Ronnie Stanley, dinged up Morgan Moses. It is not going to be a season like the 2019 vintage that is an all-timer, but still, I don't know what more you could say about Lamar and about this game. He transcended his circumstances. He beat up on a top 5 defense, and after the game, he was very, very animated talking about Mike Florio, which was still very, very funny. So he's an incredible player. It's incredible that 6 months ago, 8 months ago, however long ago, that his future in Baltimore was uncertain, and every day that Lamar gets a little bit closer to the MVP, those hundreds of millions of dollars that Eric DeCosta gave him to keep him in Baltimore for the long term look like a better and better investment.
The idea that Mike Florio would serve as motivation for anybody is frankly quite surprising. We talked about Lamar plenty. Let's talk about the rest of the offense. Zay Flowers, as mentioned, 9 catches in this game for 72 yards. He finished with just 1 catch last week against the Jaguars. So he made it a point to get involved early, and he was very involved. He had a drop as well. But other than that, very solid game from Zay Flowers. The pass catchers as a whole, not terrific. Isaiah Likely, 3 catches for 56 yards. Of course, Lamar was spreading the ball around. Gus Edwards, he found on a nice play for 39 yards. The running game behind Lamar Jackson, talk about transcending your circumstances. Not a particularly good game for Gus Edwards once again. He's had a string now. This is his 3rd straight game where he has not shown. 9 carries for 31 yards. Justice Hill ended up with more totes, 10 carries for 26 yards. I know Gus Edwards is still pretty reliable. He's one of the most reliable running backs when it comes to short yardage situations and goal-to-go situations, and they used him again tonight. He plowed his way into the end zone. But the running game behind Lamar Jackson without Keaton Mitchell does not seem to be getting any better. It doesn't seem like they have any more answers. And offensive coordinator Todd Monken continues to just rely heavily on his passing offense. Lamar has been up for the task. I mean, give him a ton of credit for advancing as much as he has as a passer this year and for leading this rushing attack. Now, 3 games in a row where he's been the leading rusher for the Ravens. But it is slightly concerning to look at the running back production that they've got over these last 3 games without Keaton Mitchell.
I think if you want to be charitable, you can say that some of the RPO stuff that we saw today with how often Lamar was being blitzed, was recognizing that he was being blitzed, and then throwing those sidearm dots to Zay Flowers on the side, to Nelson Aguilar, to Isaiah Likely. There were some cases where Lamar was throwing an RPO screen, and the guys who you would think would be set up for that screen instead decided to freelance and just vibe out and go see what was downfield, which was a little bit mystifying in that first quarter. But, I think the evolution of this offense to include more RPOs, to put the ball more in Lamar's hands, which might take away some of those design runs because he sees something in the defense that Todd Monken maybe didn't before the snap, and that's giving the offense more dropbacks as compared to more runs. It's not a great sign for this Ravens offense because this 49ers run defense, despite being like 3rd or 4th or whatever it was in yards per game, success rate was way down. They gave up over 200 yards to the Cardinals. Kyler Murray and Lamar have similar skill sets. James Conner and Gus Edwards have similar skill sets. You would think that this Ravens line would be better prepared to take on this 49ers run defense that was missing Eric Armstead, that had a hobbled Javon Hargrave inside. So, we don't want to spend too much harping on this Ravens ground game because this was such a momentous win, but it is something to kind of keep your eye on. And if the Ravens have a couple weeks off, basically, if they lock things up on Sunday against Miami, give these guys some time to get healthy, give Lamar and Todd Monken and everyone on this coaching staff some time to figure out what exactly is hamstringing them, then I think it's going to be to their benefit, because you can't have this Ravens rushing offense be as limited or as unproductive as it was today.
Yeah. But if this is what the Ravens are going to get going forward and in the playoffs from their defense, you have to feel pretty darn good about it, because this is the best that the defense, I think, has played all year. You talked about the stage mattering, the moment mattering. The defense stepped up, and maybe it wasn't their best statistical game of the season, but it was darn close. And it was also against one of the best offenses in the NFL, maybe the best offense in the NFL, in the 49ers, on the road in prime time. They forced 4 interceptions from Brock Purdy, another one from Sam Darnold. The fact that Brock Purdy, by the way, finished this game with more passing yards than Lamar Jackson shows that all statistics are a lie. But the Ravens, Mike McDonald was drawing up some incredible blitzes. There was just some amazing play by safety Kyle Hamilton with 2 first-half interceptions. The defensive backs were playing very well. The 2 inside linebackers with Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith led the Ravens, I should say, in terms of tackles. Roquan with 8, Patrick Queen with 7. They were flying around. They were hitting Christian McCaffrey, who, yes, he had a 100-yard game, but they were making him pay for it. And they were getting up in the face of Brock Purdy. They were doing everything in this game. If your first takeaway from this game is Lamar Jackson is the MVP on your morning show tomorrow, fine. But 1A under that has to be, this is a championship level defense. It's the best defense in the NFL, and it's the best defense the Ravens have had for several years, and they showed it tonight.
Boy, I hope all the Browns fans that we have on our audience base aren't listening to this. I think they would take offense to the NFL's best defense.
It just is. I mean, I have seen enough.
I don't know that Cleveland did anything today or Sunday, I guess, gosh, losing my sense of time, to dissuade any of their backers. I think those two are 1A and 1B. I would be totally fine, having it in whatever order. What Cleveland has been doing is super impressive that they're doing it without, guys like Delpit. They're banged up front. Probably gives the Ravens the nod going into the playoffs in terms of which unit would you rather have. But it's not a shame to be 1B in that conversation, because it is such an incredibly elite 1B. And to your point, Paul, about just the physicality that the Ravens are playing with, I think maybe a unremarked upon theme for this Ravens defense is just how many quarterbacks they're putting into the medical tent. It is not, we are not wishing injury on anyone, but if you go back to week 11, they end Joe Burrow's season. Week 12, Justin Herbert, I don't think misses any snaps, but there was that period briefly where he went into the medical tent. I forget exactly what injury it was, but he was definitely dealing with something, and clearly was not fully 100% by the end of that game. LA, the Rams, Matthew Stafford gets through that game unscathed. Jacksonville, they had Justin Madubuike, basically, we think, concusses Trevor Lawrence on that hit/sack, intentional grounding, whatever it was, near the goal line. And then tonight, they give Brock Purdy a stinger. I don't know if that's the medical jargon correctly, but they effectively knocked him out of this game. I guess the reporting was that he could have gone back into this one. He was cleared by the doctors to re-enter this game, but still they stuck with Sam Darnold. And I think it is, I think everything you need to know is from this Ravens mantra of them talking with their pads, and they are talking a lot. They are a world-class orator with their pads, because they are not losing anything in these debates. They are just extremely physical, extremely proficient. They're not doing anything, that's illegal. They are doing what they have to make life hell for these quarterbacks. And sometimes making life hell for these quarterbacks means knocking them out of the game and giving this Ravens offense even more of an upper hand in these games.
Yeah, and turnover luck is definitely a thing, but when you are forcing as many bad throws from Brock Purdy as they did in this game, they earned the interceptions that they had. A lot of deflected passes, a lot of batted balls. They just made Brock Purdy look awful in this game. You talk about Purdy having all of the easy buttons laid out for him, and Mike Macdonald had solutions for everything that the 49ers were throwing their way. I mean, yes, the Niners ran for 6.7 yards per carry, and McCaffrey was a large part of that, but McCaffrey does that to everybody first and foremost. And second off, they were not runs that were killing you. And some of the blitzes that Mike Macdonald was dialing up and that the Ravens were executing were just clearly befuddling this 49ers offense. And I give so much credit to the defensive backs, Marlon Humphrey picking up his first interception of the season, Brandon Stevens tipping that pass. Kyle Hamilton, of course, he has been phenomenal all season long, but specifically it feels like in the first half of games is where he makes his best impact. I think of when he had that pick six against Cleveland. I think of Indianapolis when he had the 3 first half sacks. Not to say he's not putting together complete games, although he did go out of this game with an injury, but he has been phenomenal, particularly in terms of setting the tone on defense. But Jonas, let's get into his injury because that was the most concerning moment. And again, Ravens fans had another scare seeing Kyle Hamilton grimace in pain and grab his knee. What was the latest from Coach John Harbaugh about the safety after this game?
Yeah, Harbaugh said it doesn't look bad for any of the guys who left this game. So that would be Kyle Hamilton with the knee injury. That would be Kevin Zeitler with a thigh injury. He seemed to be walking pretty fine in the locker room. Patrick McCarry was also, I guess, being evaluated for a concussion. If he enters the protocol, then because of this short turnaround, it might be a long shot for him to go Sunday against Miami just because of the timing of how everything works. But I think we saw just firsthand how impactful Kyle Hamilton is to this defense. When I wrote about him last week, the truly mind-boggling stat that I came away from it, and you don't want to make too much of a big deal about this because on-off splits can be kind of messy, especially when you're dealing with a small sample size, game script, whatever. But when he has been on the field, the Ravens were, I think, first in the NFL in yards per play allowed and second in success rate. When they didn't have him on the field, which was, the Rams game, it was the second half of the Titans game. There were some other spots where he just has not been available for this Ravens defense. Last in yards per play, last in success rate. And there were some nervy times, obviously, at the end of this one where Sam Darnold really got things cooking. There were a lot of yards over the middle of that field, especially on some catch and run stuff that you would maybe expect Kyle Hamilton to cut off or to prevent just by being in the right place at the right time. So the need for him wouldn't be as urgent next week if Jalen Waddle can't go for Miami. Obviously, star Dolphins receiver looks like he's dealing with a little bit of a high ankle injury, shin injury, whatever. Tyreek Hill is still a guy that Mike Macdonald is going to see in his nightmare. So it's not like the Ravens can rest easy if both Hamilton and Jalen Waddle are out. But you want him out there, and just the things that he was able to do tonight as a run defender, as a pass defender, as a blitzer. Again, I don't know how you can say he's anything but a top 2 safety worthy of all pro honors after what he showed tonight on the NFL's biggest stage.
No question. We should give a shout out to Tylan Wallace for another great performance in terms of punt returns and kick returns. Having 26 yards, I believe, on a punt return, 23 on a kick return. Maybe I got that reversed, but he's making the most of his opportunities. Justin Tucker appears to be back to fully automatic. Perfect in terms of field goals, perfect in terms of extra points. But Jonas, now the script turns to next week in Miami that you talked about. 2 games left, Miami and Pittsburgh. This Ravens team is 12-3, only team in the NFL with 12 wins. New York Times playoff picture right now has the Ravens at a 97% chance to win the division. They're 2 games up on the Cleveland Browns and a 74% chance to get that AFC number 1 seed and that first round bye. But a lot of it is, of course, going to come down to this Dolphins game. At home, on New Year's Eve. It is not going to be flexed, not messing with your New Year's Eve plans. It's going to be at 1:00, which means we're all going to get to go out and celebrate New Year's Eve, Jonas, which is going to be great. But it'll be a whole lot easier to celebrate that for Ravens fans if they're able to pick up that win over the Dolphins, because it essentially locks them in for the number 1 seed and a bye.
Yeah, and what tonight did, in the event that they lose, I guess is one way to phrase it, is just it does give them a little bit of cover for that Week 18 game. Obviously, if they take care of business against the Dolphins, Week 18 is basically what the Ravens make of it. But there was becoming this increasingly likely scenario that
Isaiah likely.
the Browns would win out. What's up?
Increasingly Isaiah likely.
That the Browns would win out, that the Ravens might drop a couple, and that it would be Cleveland coming from the back of the pack with a former Ravens quarterback by the name of Joseph Vincent Flacco leading them to the AFC North crown. And now, you don't want to say it's all wrapped up because the Dolphins are a good team. And we just saw what Pittsburgh was able to do against a feisty Cincinnati team. So, let's not get ahead of ourselves right now. But the Ravens at least gave themselves some cover with this win. And it's on them to keep it up. Miami, as we're going to talk about in midweek is a pretty interesting team. I think their strengths, how they profile, has kind of flip-flopped in the past half season. They've gone from being a dynamic elite offense with a respectable defense to an elite dynamic defense with a respectable offense. Obviously, they are still capable of putting up 30 on just about anyone, but they have slowed somewhat with some of those injuries to Tyreek Hill. Obviously Tua has been hit or miss some games. That offensive line has just taken its lumps injury-wise. So this might be the best defense that the Ravens face down the stretch here. If they can get it going, if they can, get out of Baltimore with a win, that the Ravens, that is, they will have earned, that number 1 seed. But I just think it's important that this Ravens team is facing some of the NFL's elite upper crust, because when you go back and you look at that 2019 team and the way that they rolled to the end of the year, yes, there were some teams that were really, really good, but it wasn't overwhelming in terms of the caliber of opponent. And I think for the Ravens to go from beating up on a pretty good Rams team, pretty good Jaguars team, elite 49ers team, and we'll see what's going on with Miami and then Pittsburgh. However, the Ravens make it to the finish line, whether it's first, second, or third, I feel like this will have left them more battle tested for 2023 than they were in 2019.
And our bird's eye view for this, looking ahead, it's difficult not to look at this season as a whole now as a massive opportunity. And now it feels like there's just so much pressure on this Ravens team because everything is coming together. You don't get many opportunities. Windows end up being far shorter and far smaller around the NFL than any team realizes in the moment. But right now, everything is coming together. You don't know how long you're going to have this kind of talent on defense. You don't know if you're going to be able to retain Patrick Queen and Justin Madubuike in the offseason. You don't know if your defensive coordinator could go to another team and become a head coach somewhere. You don't know if Lamar Jackson is going to be fully healthy like he has been this season in future seasons. So to have everything now come together, and then you look at the rest of the teams, particularly in the AFC, the Chiefs with their loss today, I mean, they continue to show that they are not an elite team and that the Ravens have some distance between themselves and the Chiefs. The Browns are obviously down their starting quarterback. We'll see what Joe Flacco can do. But so many teams are missing their starting quarterbacks. Of course, the Bengals are down their starting quarterback. The Steelers, the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence keeps getting hurt, and they are closer to a mediocre team. So this is the opportunity. This is a massive opportunity for the Ravens to make a deep playoff run. And I know the expectations are certainly higher right now than they were at the start of the season. And I don't want to put too much undue pressure on this Ravens team. But when you get a chance like this now, where you have a chance to lock up the 1 seed, to get home field advantage throughout the AFC side of the playoffs, and you have all this talent, you have these coordinators here, it just feels like you have to cash in at this point.
To quote Kelly Clarkson, some people wait a lifetime for a moment like this. It is again, don't want to keep playing the same old song and talking about 2019, but I'm guessing that when the DVOA rankings get updated tomorrow, you will see that this is a Ravens offense with a top 2 defense, a top 5 offense, and maybe now a top 5 special teams. I think the Ravens were top 10 coming into this one, and obviously the past 4, 5, 6 weeks they've again looked like one of the NFL's best special teams units. So it is, if you have just one of those units that's like top 5, top 3, and the rest are average to above average, you've got yourself a pretty good team with a chance of beating anyone in the playoffs. If you've got all 3 of those and home field advantage and a healthy quarterback and a whiz kid defensive coordinator and maybe Mark Andrews coming back, maybe Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses getting even healthier because of the possibility of having week 18 off and then that wild card round off, expectations will be high. Again, don't want to look too far ahead because a lot can happen over these next 2 weeks, but you're right, this is as wide open as the AFC has ever been in terms of the Ravens finding a way to the front of the pack. If they beat Miami and Miami is the AFC's number 2 team, then who are they going to go into playoffs really afraid of? I think you could probably count on one hand the number of teams in the AFC or NFC that you feel like they would, really consider themselves to be even close to equals with. So, you know, again, a lot can change, a lot will change. All it takes is one bad break, one bad step for a guy to blow out his knee and for the entire course of this season's trajectory to change. But what the Ravens have done now, what the Ravens have done tonight, uh, is really impressive. And it would be frankly surprising if they aren't rewarded for their efforts with a top 2 seed in the AFC.
And what is even better than perhaps, the statistics is just the way that they continue to play with fire under them. I mean, the 3 losses that they have, as frustrating as those 3 games were, they have not gotten blown out in any game this season. They have not looked outclassed. They have not lost their effort in any game this season. They are fired up. They are fueled by the disrespect that they deem.
Going to be hard to find that on Monday.
Yeah,
or Sunday, Tuesday.
they're not going to be underdogs, and they're not going to be underdogs probably the rest of the way. You don't know, but it's going to be, the path now is laid out for the Ravens, and you just hope that they can keep on this path, not look too far ahead, not trip into any trap games, not befall the same kind of things that befell them in 2019 and that loss to the Titans. But it is all now laid out for them, and it's an exciting time right now. It's going to be an exciting atmosphere, I'm sure, on New Year's Eve at that 1:00 game. And we are going to have complete coverage for you as well. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I am at Paul Mancano. And of course, follow us at All Banner Sports on Twitter. Please like, review, subscribe on all of your favorite platforms. Share the podcast with your friends. Just 2 regular season games to go. And then we're going to have full, complete playoff coverage on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe for $1 for 6 months. Thanks to everybody for tuning in live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, or listening to it after the fact. We will have another episode for you. I'm thinking this Thursday at 11 a.m. Jonas, how does that sound to you?
It sounds a whole lot better than Christmas night, Paul.
It certainly does. And it sounds a lot better than, look, I love your company as much as anybody, but Jonas, I don't know if I wanted to be spending New Year's Eve popping champagne with you in the media workroom.
Hey, there's some popcorn here. I got a free water bottle for you. But yeah, I think you made the right decision hanging out in Philadelphia with your family and loved ones.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have another holiday to celebrate in a week. Jonas, thanks so much for everybody for tuning in. For Jonas,